Hey guys, Courtney Patrick here from Create and Propel. I am the founder and a freelance brand consultant, and today's video is about how to plan and manage a campaign. Now, you guys know that my specialism is brand, but brand covers all areas of the business. And so a lot of times my clients will come to me and they will say, how do I go about launching my first campaign? Or how do I create a more effective campaign than what I was doing? Now, first comes first. What's a campaign? So obviously every business will be marketing and having some sort of sales activity to get leads in the door or to make sales. Now, campaigns are special because it's focused on a specific audience or a specific message. So the key word there is targeted marketing activity. So in a campaign, you will have a specific concept or story that you're pushing to the market. You have a budget attributed to it, and you will push it across several channels. A great example is looking at brands like Nike. If you've driven anywhere, you've seen their billboards. If you've watched TV, you've seen a TV ad. If you've been online, you've seen their digital ads. So a campaign is usually multifaceted across lots of different channels. And a lot of people do think that the only brands that need to have a campaign are those big brands, the Nikes of the world, but you could not be more wrong. In 2020 and beyond, every single brand should consider having a campaign in some way. They are attainable, they are achievable at any budget. So today I'm going to help you figure out how to navigate that on your own, and whether you choose to work with an agency partner, which is part of my recommendation that I'll talk about at the end of this video, or you decide to go it out on your own, I'm going to help you get the bare basics down for you to be able to do that. So today we're going to answer a few questions. Number one is, how do I choose the right channels? Number two is, how do I define a budget? Number three is, what on earth should I push out in a campaign? And number four is, how do I measure success? So we'll cover all of that in today's video. And without further ado, let's get to it. Okay, guys, so the first step of any campaign is to start with research. And this is where you're going to find all of the information you need to feed into your campaign. A lot of times clients think that you just wake up and you start pushing money into Facebook and then automatically you'll get sales off the back of that. But the key to a successful campaign is a successful campaign reflects and mirrors customer preferences. So you need to be best friends with your customer. You need to know exactly what they're looking for. What do they do on a day-to-day basis? Where can we reach them? What do they want to hear? What do they want to see? If you give customers what they want, then they will respond appropriately to your marketing. So number one, I want you to look at your customer demographics. What age are they? What kind of job role do they have? What do they do for a living outside of that? What are their hobbies? What are their interests? What TV shows are they watching? What clothing brands are they buying? In addition to your product or service, what else is encompassing into their world? And the second is, what is their pains and gains? So what problems should you be solving for them? What things are they looking for in their life? What issues are they struggling through? And what are the things that make them so very happy? And how does my product or my service go into that? So how do I respond to those pains and gains? Number three, where can I reach them that's organic to their daily activity already? So you want to be placing your adverts and your campaign content into the locations and channels that they're already engaging with on a daily basis. If you are expecting your customers to change their routine in some way to find your ad, then you're looking at it completely wrong. We cannot modify customer behavior in that way. The most effective campaigns are the ones that place quite naturally into their users' daily activity. So a great example is, if you're trying to reach 40-year-old women and you find that Facebook's actually the most effective channel to reach them, then why would you waste your money on TikTok or any of the other channels that it's likely that that audience isn't going to be engaging with? And last is, what benchmarks should I be looking to achieve? What are other people achieving in the marketplace? Now, we have an entire section looking at how do you measure success of a campaign. I'll talk about that towards the end of the video. However, you want to know what other people are receiving and how effective these channels are. So for example, if it's Facebook and you're looking to run a paid campaign, campaign? What's the average amount of impressions people are getting within a certain budget? What's the average click-through rate? What's the average website conversion rate that I should be achieving? You want to be armed and equipped, and whether you choose to work with an agency or you choose to go it on your own, it's important that you know this so that you know you're getting best value from those platforms. Now you've done your research. And so now, what does that tangible output look like? What is it that you need to achieve from this research? Number one is you need to have an outline of a creative concept, or at least some recommendations for content. Now I'll talk to you about what creative concept is in a little bit more detail. However, you want to know what's the overarching story arc that you're selling to your audience. What is the theme behind all of the content that I push out, both in terms of what I'm saying and in terms of what it looks like and what it feels like. Number two is you want to have an outline of the channel plan. So off the back of your research, you will know what channels you need to be advertising on. Now, once you understand your budget, some of that may not be realistic. However, this is the outline that helps us form our opinions to navigate that down further down the road. And number three, you should have an outline of campaign benchmarks. So monitoring and tracking success throughout a campaign is absolutely vital to make sure that you're getting best value for money. And you want to use those industry benchmarks to help you set the course, which will also help us define our budget, which I will talk through in a bit. Okay, so next is, what is a campaign concept and how do you go about building that? Now, one of the most fun parts of building a campaign is the fact that you get to stretch your brand a little bit. You get to perhaps play out of bounds, and you don't want to completely deviate from your normal brand. However, when you have day-to-day marketing that's reaching lots of different audiences and selling lots of different products and services, you do need to kind of confine yourself into a more steady flow. But when you have a targeted campaign, you can target your message so it's specifically relevant to that audience or that product and service that you're pushing towards, which means you get to have a bit of fun in terms of creating something that feels a little bit different, but still plays in the general game that you're trying to play with your normal everyday brand. Do not take this as me telling you you need to completely deviate. I like the word or the verb stretching because it's just kind of pushing you maybe a little bit out of your comfort zone without deviating completely too far. Now, a campaign concept really relies on two key elements. Number one is your hook. So what is the narrative? What's the story that you're trying to sell? What is it that you're telling your audience that's relevant to their specific need that you're meeting, or relevant to the specific product or service, perhaps a feature that you want to focus on? And the other element is a clever call to action. So this can also work as a campaign hashtag, which is really great if you're looking at a digital marketing campaign. But what is then the line that gets people to go from viewing your content to clicking through to your website or purchasing your product or service? So you want to make sure that you look at the story from both of those elements. And then once you have that hook and that call to action, fill the story in between. Talk to me about all of the different elements that you can spin this campaign concept into. I think one of the hardest things about a campaign is thinking, oh my gosh, how do I create all of this content to go across maybe a 3-month campaign without getting bored? Because you have to think about your customer, but you also have to think about your team. There's a lot of things that go into creating a marketing campaign, and you want to make sure it's not boring for the people that are writing it, because it will certainly be boring for your customers if they can feel that through you. So you've got to have both of those elements. I think it's always good to have a little bit of an example. So let's say you're running a campaign because you're trying to get students to sign up to a utility program. So get your uni house sorted sounds a lot better than sign up to your utilities. You want to have a little bit of fun with it. You want to think about what is the bigger picture that you're selling. So for this particular example, you're getting your house sorted. It's that feeling of calm, that feeling of there's so many things to look at, but now I'm done and dusted and there's no more to it. So you want to sell a message and a story. And if you are curious about how do you actually go about building a story, I do have another YouTube video on my channel called The Art of Storytelling, and I do invite you to take a look at that. So this is one of the most fun parts of that. Once you have that story, you can start to build a visual identity around that. So you can stretch your visuals, your look and feel. Maybe you have something that's super relevant to that specific audience. And it works for a campaign as long as it's still using some of the assets that go within your normal brand. So that is how to create a creative concept. So now we're going to talk about how to define your campaign budget and your channel plan. And this is often going to be a quite difficult exercise to understand what the budget might be if you've never run a campaign before. And that is because you likely will not know the cost per acquisition. So very simply, what that's calculating is how much money it takes to take a prospect and turn them into a lead that you can then take on that sales journey. And of course, the less well-known you are, the higher your cost per acquisition, because there's two things that you're going to have to look at. Number one, you're going to have to tell people, hey, this is who I am, this is what my brand is, this is what I sell. And number two, you're then going to have to spend money to convert. So bigger brands like a Google and Nike, they have a less cost per acquisition because of course we know who those brands are. So majority of the money they pump out into their campaigns is about conversion, so getting people to actually buy. Whereas if you're an SME or a smaller player in the marketplace, again, you are going to have a higher cost per acquisition up front because you're going to have to run an awareness campaign in addition to remarketing and converting people. So it's important to know that going through. If you invest the money up front to build awareness, then campaigns down the line will be more effective and the less money you'll have to pump into the awareness agenda because people will know who you are and you will start reaping the results of that conversion campaign. Now, to find the budget, you sort of have to work backwards. So what you want to understand is what's the value of the sale. So if you're a product, you know exactly what that is. If you're a service, I understand that sometimes you're going to sell an intangible thing that could cost a lot of different things. I want you to take the time to understand what the average sale might be. And then I would like you to understand how many sales you would like to achieve off the back of it. So that can be simple. You might be looking in December and go, actually, we need 30 more sales, which will equate to this much revenue. Now that is the ballpark that we'll start in and work backwards to be able to define our campaign budget. So there's two metrics that we're going to use to help us give us a parameter for our budget, because obviously it costs money to make money, if that makes sense. So number one is you want to understand the click-through rates of the ads or the activity that you're pushing out. So for example, in digital marketing, if we have an ad, then we know that the click-through rate can be anywhere from 0.5 to 2% on average, which sounds incredibly low. And let me just define what a click-through rate is very simply. So when you have an ad on a digital space, you have impressions. So that's the amount of people that are looking at that ad. The click-through rate tells us how many people of those viewers are actually clicking through to find out more, to go to your website. So that's going to tell us how much traffic is going to come from our website, or go to our website rather. And the second benchmark we need to look at is our website conversion rate. Now, again, if you're running a offline campaign, message me and we can talk about something specific. I'm going to focus on a digital campaign because in 2020, that's probably where most of your advertising dollars are going to go for your campaigns. Now, on your website, in your Google Analytics, which all of you should have access to, you will have a website conversion rate. Now, if you sell a product, you know that that conversion rate means how many people that visit the site are actually making a purchase. Now, for a services business, professional services, whatever it might be, your conversion rate should tell you how many of your users are actually going through to an inquiry. So that's the goal that you're trying to achieve. Now, we work a little bit backwards from there, because if we know that our website conversion rate is 25%, and we know that we would like to have 30 conversions, then we do the maths backwards. So we figure out how many users we then need to generate to our site to get 30 inquiries off the back of that. We take that number and we figure out then how many impressions we need to be able to get that many click-throughs to the site. Now, it is quite difficult and quite daunting to think about this in the beginning. And if it is your first campaign, I will always recommend that you reach out to an agency partner because they will help you navigate the process in a much simpler way. But this is just about defining sort of a bare bones structure for what sort of budget you should be realistically looking at to achieve your sales target or your goal. And once you have the number of impressions or the number of click through that you need to have, or how many people seeing that ad, that makes it a lot easier to navigate these digital marketing platforms because, of course, they sell a certain amount of impressions to you. So if you pump in £1 or $1 or whatever your currency might be, Facebook will tell you on average how many people will see that ad. So it's a lot of work up front. It's a lot of maths required. But I think it's important that you look at it that way because a lot of times people have an unrealistic expectation of how much money they need to spend to be able to get a sale. And again, if you've never run a campaign before, your cost per acquisition is going to be higher. And it's likely that you've never really understood your cost per acquisition on other marketing channels. Now, if you are running out-of-home campaigns on billboards or things of that sort, you just need to be looking at the conversion rate for those channels. And for example, if you're not bringing traffic to your website, you're bringing them to a telemarketing line, then what's your conversion rate there? You can do this based off of the statistics you have. And if you've never captured any of these stats before, it's probably time that you do that to prep yourself for your next big campaign. Okay, just a quick little update off the back of that budget spiel, because I talked a little bit about this in the previous bit. However, how do you go about defining your channel plan? So it's going to take a lot of maths to work back and forth to figure out how much money you actually need to work with, and then figure out what's the most effective channel. So what's going to give you the most bang for your buck. And once you have that information, in order to identify your channel plan, you also need to look at it in two ways. Number one, what are going to be the most effective channels for awareness? So for example, there are some digital channels that are better for just getting views. There's specific types of content. So video is a great way to get a lot of impressions because people are actually going to look at those videos. However, you also need to be looking at conversion activity. So this is where probably more remarketing comes into play. So once we know a user has looked at our ad, and we can track that with something called cookies, which I won't go into a lot of detail on because I'm sure there's a lot of other people out there on YouTube that can describe that in a much more effective way. However, when we're remarketing to someone, it's all about conversion. It's saying, hey, you know who I am, and now I want you to buy from me. So the message is going to sound different, and perhaps the channel will be a little bit different. So just make sure that when you are finalizing that channel plan, you are looking at both of those objectives. So how do we then build a content plan? So now we know the budget, now we know the creative concept, now we know the channels that we'll be advertising on, but now you need to break it into granular detail of what you're saying when on every channel. The most effective campaigns are holistic campaigns. They have the same overarching message running across every platform. And it also is important to understand how long that campaign is going to run because you also need to have some diversity in the message that you're sending out. You know, for example, if you have a 4-week campaign that's just on Facebook, then all you'll need to focus on is 4 weeks worth of content to push out on that one channel. And it's likely that a lot of it will stay the same. But if you're running a 4-month campaign across a lot of different channels, then there's a lot of diversity that you need to look at in terms of what am I pushing out and when. And the best thing to do is plan on a granular level. So I like to map it out week by week, every single channel, day by day. What am I posting where? And there are so many different tools that you can use to do that. I am maybe a little bit old school and I like to use Excel or Google Sheets and create my own personal Gantt chart and work backwards from there. However, there are lots of tools that make it more effective, platforms like Monday.com that you can look at and break it down into that detail. And if you're not a project management person and you've never heard of Gantt before, you need to look that up. It's Gantt, I believe, and it is the most effective way of mapping out that activity because not only do you need to understand what is the topic of every single bit of content or ad that you push out. You also need to break down the work that goes into creating that. So if your campaign launches on July 1st, I'm sorry, but you can't create the content on July 1st because you'll need to have created it ahead of time. You'll need to have review, approval before that goes live. So you need to be thinking about it in that way. But additionally, you need to split the ownership across multiple people. The most successful campaigns are collaborative campaigns. It's making sure that, the buck doesn't lie on just one person if all of it falls down. So attribute owners, get down to the details, tell me the process, tell me when things need to be signed off, when they need to be completed, when they need to be approved, and then you will have full control over the process once it goes live. Now, the key to success for any campaign is measuring your success. Guys, you need to be regularly monitoring your campaigns and adapting and reacting to the information that you have. It's so easy these days to get used to the idea of automation and AI, and all of these come into the digital marketing campaigns. However, there's a lot to be learned and a lot that you can respond on to make sure that it's more effective. There's a difference between benchmarks and reality, and that's because the content and everything else that we push out weighs such a big effect on the end result that comes within that. So if you have a 4-week campaign, every week you should be looking at how your adverts are performing. You need to be adapting and reacting to that. So for example, if you're finding that your click-through rate is a lot lower than what the industry benchmark is, then there's a problem with your content, and you need to be able to look at that and identify the problem and make sure that it feels more relevant to your users. Listen to the people that you're advertising to. If you find you're not getting enough impressions, well, there's probably an issue you need to look on the platform. Is there something going on with the money that you're spending? Are you not putting enough budget to it? Is Facebook just targeting it to a specific type of person instead of a larger group because it wants it to be more relevant? Look into it. You need to find these things along the way. If you're coming at the end of a 4-week campaign and just looking at the results then you're never going to get the output that you wanted to in the beginning. So you need to have regular, I like to call them WIP meetings, work in progress, and you need to bring multiple members of the team together. And this is also important for stakeholder management, because if you are a younger marketeer, you will know that there is a difficulty in trying to translate what we do into meaningful commercial words. By having people from across the business together to understand and see the journey along the way, there's a lot of learning to be done and a lot of help in terms of getting you guys to think as a collective group and not just putting the pressure on one individual. So measure your success, have regular WIP meetings, and always adapt and react. So to polish us off of this video, because I imagine this is quite long, but I have tried to condense a lot of information into a little simple, easy to understand video. However, I do want to stop and kind of give you guys some general tips. So as a small business owner myself, I understand that it feels quite daunting to give your money to outside experts, and there's a real desire to take everything on in-house. And if you have the skills and the experience to do that, then please go ahead and crack on. However, it's so important that I stress you need to utilize external experts where possible, because I have seen this happen so many times. I have seen campaigns that were outsourced to experts to run them, and I have seen campaigns that were done completely in-house, and the difference in results is really exponential. The reason why this is the case is, especially when we're looking at digital marketing platforms, they are a niche and they need to be monitored not every week, but every day, and every hour things can change. And by having somebody that knows exactly what to do, exactly how to work the system, you're going to maximize the results you get on that. So you do need to be considering this up front. And so when you're in the process of establishing your budget, you're obviously going to be working backwards with that maths that we talked about earlier. But you also need to think, if I spare, for example, an extra certain amount of budget to give to an expert to monitor and manage this for me, it's also going to make your life a heck of a lot easier easier because you're making sure that you have time to do whatever it is you need to do to run the business smoothly outside of this campaign. You need to be smart. You need to make sure that you create a very detailed brief of exactly what you want, exactly what you're looking for, and then send it out to multiple agencies and specialists. Try freelancers as well as agencies and see what you get and see what's the best value for your budget. The key is the brief. So if you go to an agency and say, I'd like to run a campaign, well, I don't know anything about budget or things of that sort, well, they're going to do their best to figure it out, but they won't have the information they need to tailor it to you. And what will likely happen is off the back of that, you'll think, oh, they're expensive, or I don't really understand what this is about. So if you know that a campaign that's worth more than £1,000 sounds like an absolute chaos to you because you don't have the budget to do that, then you need to tell them. Don't wait for them to tell you what the budget is. If you have an idea of what you think expensive is, then you need to include that in your brief so they can tailor it to exactly what you're looking for. I hope that you guys found this video useful. Again, these are just some basic tips to help guide you. And I think the key thing here is understanding the process before you start going into campaigns. There's a lot of planning time that goes up front, and there's a lot of conversations that you'll have with multiple stakeholders along the journey. So understanding all of these elements, or at least having an idea of it before you get started, will mean that you have a much smoother project management process than you would if you were just kind of going into it cold. So if you do have any other questions, I invite you to get in contact with me. You can find my details at www.createandpropel.com. And I also have a range of YouTube videos for you guys to watch on several different topics. So I do invite you to check out the rest of the videos on my channel. I hope that you found this interesting, and thank you so much for tuning in.